Welcome to the Lights Out Podcast. This is Chris Lights Out Lytle, and this is our journey to document the history of mixed martial arts. I have brought with me my friend, the MMA detective Mike Davis, and together we will preserve the history and hear some great stories from the world in the era of the no-holds-barred. Thank you and enjoy.
Welcome back to the Lights Out MMA History Podcast. I am Joey Venti. I'm with the host of the show, the MMA detective Mike Davis. We have a special episode for you today. Once again, we are joined by friend of the podcast and founding father of mixed martial arts, John Perretti. And thanks to John, we are also joined by the former UFC welterweight champion of the world, Carlos the Ronin Newton. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Hey guys, we have a party crasher here.
You got your little boy with you, huh?
But yeah.
Okay. Well, Carlos, I think what we start with your desire to complete projects. In December of 2011, you gave an interview stating that you have turned your focus on fighting for the proper regulation of the sport. And you're going to be heavily involved in the fighters union, and you're heavily involved in a fighters union against the UFC. Why don't you take us through it? Recently got settled. Why don't you just kind of sum that up for us?
Well, the action that just got settled, that was a long journey, and it was a class action lawsuit. Basically, I'm involved with the Mixed Martial Arts Fighters Association, MMAFA, and I believe that's the union you're referring to, right? We don't call ourselves a union, but you can think of it the same way. It's an association, union, same thing. It's not an employment union because we're not employees. But as you can see, I'm in a grappling match right now. And this little guy is going to get taken away in a second. But basically, for his future and the future of all the fighters that will come after him, that's what I'm fighting for. So there you go. That guy, you see him try to put a rear naked on me? I don't want him putting rear nakeds in the UFC. I want him putting on rear naked chokes in his own promotion.
Good. Okay. So Carlos, one of the explosive things that was teased was the messages between like managers and the people that work for the UFC, particularly the matchmakers. Is any of that going to come to light?
It will, and it is coming to light currently, right? Like I'm sure you've seen some stuff and you're referring to it. It's just the tip of the iceberg right now that you see. And it's all gonna come to the surface. It's coming to the surface. There's more work to be done. There's a lot more work to be done. We still have a long journey to go. There's still a lot of guys out there who need to learn more and understand better what's actually going on, and basically get going.
Carlos, 10 years ago, whatever it was, when your lawyer contacted me, I really wanted to be involved in this because, as you know, I'm a proponent of the fighter, and I've always backed the fighters. And I thought I would be, a pretty good representative because I only cared about the fighters, and I refused to work for the Fertittas when they were going to own all the fighters. So, it kind of fit in perfectly. But I never heard back from him. I tried to contact him like 4 or 5 times. I just want you to know that.
Yeah. Well, trust me, man. When things got revving, we're buried and stuff. And even me trying to catch up, with the legal team, it was crazy hit and miss. And was a time too when things got started. Initially, like Rob Macy and that law firm. I first spoke with Rob, but there was other law firms I checked out, and every law firm I checked out that initially said come back later, after I'll say a few months, they all called and said we want the case. but
I only spoke to Rob.
Yeah, and then by that time, the case already got signed on with a couple other firms, and the door was closed to a lot of other people that wanted to get on board. And then from there, they kind of just went to lockdown, total secrecy, and got to work.
Yeah, there was a lot of subterfuge happening. Like there was other unions being sponsored. It seemed like to specifically kind of cloud the waters and really kind of hurt you more than it did help you. And that was a legit.
A lot of it was red herring stuff, and just to throw people off the trail big time, right? And then there's a word that that pops up a lot of times. Union. You gotta understand. Yeah, there's a boxing union and so forth. But boxers aren't unionized for the purpose of negotiating and so forth. That's not what they're unionized for. They're unionized so that there's an association of boxers with one voice and can advocate for things like health and better rules, better governance of the sport and so forth, right? But when it comes to the actual marketplace and so forth, we're contractors, we're independent contractors, always will be. We couldn't be employees if we wanted to. It's just not possible. And also, you just can't have dudes unionized whose job is to put the other guy out of work as quickly as possible. It just doesn't work,
Okay.
right? An MMA fighter's career, if it lasts more than one fight, they're lucky. You can't you can't unionize like that. And for that, and basically, there's no sport in the world where the athletes are employees. There's none. They're all contractors. They're all
Right.
contractors, right?
Okay.
And the only case where that happens, where we talk about union, and it's very sound legal logic and technicality why it's so, is league athletes are signed to one promoter. They're signed to one promoter, their team. All right. But in order to be able to negotiate against the league, they have to form a union for negotiation purposes. And that's the only purpose why they have a union in leagues, is to negotiate against the league. And the minute they cannot negotiate, the union dissolves, and that exclusivity clause in the league becomes invalid, which allows the athletes to now play in Europe, play in any other league that they want. If they could not come up, if they through arbitration could not come up with a new contract deal. That's the purpose of what they call a union in league sports. But as far as that's beyond that, that's the only thing. League athletes are independent contractors, period. And as long as you can move from one promoter and still fight for the same title or fight for multiple titles, then you win, because then the promoters have to bid on you, just like they
Your
do in league
services.
sports.
Yeah.
They
Your
bid for your
services.
services.
Yep.
That's one of the greatest tricks. And those, you're talking about throwing mud in the water, clouding, trying to cloud things up. They keep getting guys to chase their own tail, misleading, getting athletes to mislead athletes. By talking about what they don't understand. All right. MMA is the only sport in the world. It is the only sport in the world where a promoter has their own title and can have exclusive contracts at the same time. Analyze that, digest that. It is the only sport in the world where it has a proper regulator in place that is like that. There is no sport in this planet, on this planet, that has a proper regulator. That is jurisprudence. That is court terminology. A proper regulator and a promoter who has exclusive contracts at the same time. It does not exist. It's been litigated in every sport, been found invalid, been found to be anti-competitive, has been found to be in violation of antitrust in many sports over the years. And MMA came about at a very opportune time, at a time where, it's kind of like that scene in Lord of the Rings, where some things that should not have been forgotten were forgotten. And by the time MMA came about, people were just all about just entertaining me. After the Don King era, was over, and North America lost its grip on boxing through those anti-competitive contracts, through those exploitative contracts that Don King had fighters signing and so forth. Boxing moved overseas to greener and better pastures, because now American promoters had to compete directly with promoters from Russia, England,
All over the world.
or
Yeah.
all over the world. A lot of people took that as a sign that boxing was dying, but no, the monopoly died.
Okay.
And boxing flourished after that.
Absolutely. So let's start with your first trainer on record, Modi Isaaks from the Samurai Club. That's where everything kind of began with you.
Yeah.
What do you remember about those days?
Yeah. Fun days. To correct the record, my first trainer was Thomas Sharkey, former.
So the SWAT guy. He's a SWAT team in Toronto, head of SWAT?
Captain in the Emergency Task Force, former British SAS soldier. He was a UDT, a two-time. He went to Vietnam twice, did 2 tours of Vietnam. Was a part of the underwater demolition teams that evolved into the present-day Navy SEALs. He was my first trainer. He was the guy that came to me one day and said, I have a friend I'd like you to go train with. He has some things that he can show you. And he introduced me to Moni. He also told me,
Isaaks.
He also told me he couldn't trust Moni as far as he could throw him. So be careful.
What was your experience with Moni?
My experience with Moni was great. Yeah, Moni was a great instructor. And you learned a lot more from Moni than just martial arts. You learned a great deal of psychology from Moni. Just his presence, the way he carried himself, you picked up on all of that. And when I was 18, I basically understood how things were. I told him I wanted a release from my contract because the terms are exploitative, unfair to me. He basically tried to tell me, no, I'm not going to release you from your contract. And I basically handed him a letter from a lawyer. I said, here, you don't own me. I'm out of here. And that was the last time I saw Moni.
Okay, so from there, did you go with, was it Terry Riggs and Joel Gerson, or where did you go after Moni?
Yeah, so basically after Moni, when I left Samurai Club, a lot of guys were shocked that I left the club. And in 6 months, the club membership dropped to like 25% of what it was when I was there. And I ended up going to other gyms and so forth with a lot of the other guys, Joel Gerson, Terry Riggs, and we all trained together other places. Some guys stayed on with Moni, like Joel stayed on with Moni for a long time after that until he caught wind of him and figured out, what a wolf in sheep's clothing he actually was. And Joel went on to open his own club, one of the most successful clubs in Canada. And Terry Riggs went on to open his own club, became one of the largest and most successful clubs in Canada by far. And I ended up training with Terry, and he became my manager.
That's right. And Joe Roku as well. Joe Roku as well was in that group of guys.
Yeah. So, we had a great time.
You mentioned exploitative contract. What really stood out in regards to what was unfair to you?
For me, just the nature of the sport, and the percentages stood out just because of the nature of the sport.
What was Moni asking for?
At the time, he wanted like 50% of my earnings. I was like, no, man. I said, I have one fight career. You can have many fighters. Right? And you got to understand, that's why a lot of people understand why the UFC situation is so messed up. The UFC can be, a promoter has no lifespan. Has no
shelf life. No shelf life.
Yeah. Right? But basically every fighter, you have a shelf life. So the market forces automatically balance those shelf lives. if the market forces are in play. You
So,
gotta
so
understand how messed
yeah,
up things are.
John Perretti, did you ever? This Moni guy is Modi Isaaks. He's got a pretty big reputation. Do you remember dealing with him at all?
I met him through Carlos, and he told me that he was Mossad.
Really?
Absolutely, in no uncertain terms. And do you remember any of this?
He was an Israeli commando. He was a member of some commando units. If he was Mossad specifically, I'm not sure. I ended up being introduced to another gentleman through Moni named Avi Nardia. And Avi to this day is still currently one of my senseis. He's one of my headmasters. And he is he's bona fide Mossad and Israeli Secret Service for many years. He's a
This is
corporal
just
Israeli military.
that's what he represented to me. And I always take that with a grain of salt. I have to deal with a lot of people who claim to be a lot of things. You understand that,
Oh yeah,
and
totally get it.
and
Yeah, totally get it.
the world was very, very small. And I was trying to create a sport, because you said before that that it was just to make people watch and to get excited and stuff, but that wasn't the extreme fighting, and that wasn't the UFC I tried to create. I was trying to create a sport from day one, and it took a long time for me to do that.
Yeah.
So,
No, for sure. And that's I'm continuing that battle for you, man. I'm trying to create a sport.
so
Yeah.
hey, Carlos, in your career, you had some incredible highs in your career, but it never seemed like you trained with a super gym. You always had like your little group of guys, and you were obviously the lion in the room. Did you ever think about going to train at some of the bigger gyms?
I did. I really did. But I was also just too aware of the shelf life and the opportunities, how many opportunities lay ahead, how many choices I had to make at the time. A lot of people don't understand or don't realize the day I fought Matt Hughes, not Matt Hughes, the day I fought Pat Miletich and won my title, the next day I went back home, flew, and went straight to my university and wrote my fourth year psychology exam. Like I was,
Yeah.
I was just a different dude, man.
Okay.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
I remember my professor looked at me and goes, "Nice fight, buddy. Here's your exam. You have 45 minutes. Bye."
Champ. Champ, right?
Right? And yeah, I just wanted to make sure, as a person, as an individual, that I was just being completely honest with myself. And I also knew at the time too, it was even more of a risk doing what guys do now, joining a super gym and so forth. Because you join a super gym, you could you could possibly get on top and make a couple $1 million. Back in my day, you're joining a super gym, and trust me, it's kind of like it's exponent. You have to give exponentially more when you step up to those levels and so forth, right? And when you say a super gym too, at my time, the guys knew what they knew, and we were good at what we did. We didn't have what I call currently a fake industry where guys are telling guys, "Oh, come here and come there. I could do this for you. I could do that for you." When really they all work for the UFC. It wasn't like that back in my day, right?
Right.
Like I'll tell you, like Mayweather doesn't have a super gym. It's Mayweather. Period.
Okay.
Right? Boxers don't do super gyms. They do secrecy.
Okay, so one of the things that was said about you in some of your earlier fights, that at one point you got stabbed.
Yeah.
Would you mind walking us through that? Because I've heard this statement, but I don't think I've ever heard the story.
Oh, that was interesting stuff. I went out one. I was in training camp. That's the sad part about the whole story. I was in training camp. I was had a bunch of my friends after training one day said, "Hey, we want to go out, have some fun, go party." But Carlos, why don't you come along? You be our driver. You be our designated driver. We can all drink and have a good time. So I go out. I had one friend. He's a bit mouthy. Sam Zukla is his name, and he acted like a tough guy. Carlos Newton's around, acts like a tough guy, gets an altercation at the frickin' at this club that we're at. I'm with 6 other guys, and out of those 6 other guys, 2 of them actually became UFC fighters themselves, Claude Patrick and Mark Bocek.
Oh,
We're all out that night. And I basically said to I saw Sam getting mouthy with some guy, like getting into an altercation. And I basically grabbed Sam. I said, "Let's go. We're going home." All right. And Sam's like swearing, telling the guy, "Oh, fuck you up, blah, blah, blah." I'm like, I was just dancing, having a good time. I literally was like dancing with these 2 Greek girls who were just having a great time with this guy dancing. And I turn around, Sam won't let it go. So I pick up Sam. I literally carried him out the club. I said, "We're going home. I gotta go home. I gotta wake up and train." All right. So we leave the club, and I turn around and I see a bunch of guys walking out of the club towards us because they still got a beef with Sam. And basically, they're asking me, "Hey, Dredd, you know that guy? You with that guy?" I'm like, "No, man, I don't know him at all." All right. We just want to go home, guys. That's it. And a third guy's walking right in my blind spot. And, as a fighter, I don't even have to see you in my blind spot. I can sense you. I can I can feel the pity pat. I can feel the vibrations in your footstep. You know, I can just sense you're over my shoulder. All right. And the other guy's asking me, "Hey, so Dredd, you with this guy?" I'm like, "I don't know the guy. I just want to go home. I just want him to get home safe. I just want everyone to get home safe." And then the one guy in my blind spot is kind of like breathing on my ear, and the other guys say, "So Dredd, you with the guy or what?" And they're looking like they want to step, they're getting ready they're pulling up their pants and shit, getting ready to jump. So I turn around and I grab the other guy who's breathing on my blind spot by the larynx, and I pick him up by his throat. And I turn around and I said to all the other guys, "Guys, just want to go home." And they all rushed. I picked up that one guy and I dropped him on his head. He was out. He was done. Because I'll tell you, nothing hits harder than the ground. I could punch you pretty hard, but if I throw you on your head, I'll do a much better job. And that guy got chalk lined. He was gone. The other guys looked at me like, "What the fuck did you just do? You just like you like you you just destroyed this guy." And they thought about it for a second, and then the whole club emptied out, and a whole bunch of guys started running. It became like a crazy riot right away. Bottles, everything started flying. And I told my friend Sam, "Run, run." I told my buddy Mark Bocek, everybody, I said, "Guys, run. Let's go. Let's get out of here. Run." I take off like a bullet. And before I know it, I stop at the next intersection. I'm by myself in the intersection, thinking to myself, where are the guys? And I look off way in the distance. I see all my buddies getting swarmed, getting jumped, getting all crazy in there. I freaking, I ran. I thought to myself, I'm safe where I am. I'm like, guys, I'm like at least half a kilometer away. And I could just see mayhem, and I could make out guys, like from their coats and stuff, from what they're wearing. That looks like Mark. That looks like Claude. Holy shit, they're still in there. So next thing you know, I'm back in the storm. I pull a guy off a Claude. Pulling guys away, breaking guys up, because I'm pretty sure Claude's trying to help out the other guys too, who can't fight that well. So is Mark trying to protect the other guys who can't fight that well. And I'm just telling them, "Let's go, get out of here." I grabbed Sam and I freaking ran with Sam, carrying Sam down to that back through that same intersection that I ran into Tim Hortons holding Sam, and I tell Sam, "Go, get out of here." I threw him over the countertop of the Tim Hortons. I said, "Just hide behind the countertop." That was the whole fucking. There were at some point in my whole process of freeing up my friends, I dropped so many guys that everyone said, "Get the dread." So I basically became like this distraction, which took the heat off of everyone else and my friends. Ran into Timmy's, and I took a position. I took up. I ran. I actually ran up to the freaking counter. I said to the teller, "Call the cops." She's like, "You know how long the cops take to get here?" I go, "Call the cops now. There's a bunch of guys coming here. There's gonna be some crazy trouble." And before she could be mouthy back to me, the whole restaurant started screaming. Every person sitting down there having a coffee started screaming, going, "Ah!" Because guys were coming in with weapons, fucking everything's just smashing up the place. They didn't even open the door; they smashed through the door. And I just took up position in the center of the freaking in front of the Timmy's and just started going to town. And fucking threw Sam over the countertop. Said, "You stay there." And just fucking just started going to town. And I remember there's three guys left, and they like we're just scrapping. Like it was from the cops on account from video footage and everything. They said it looked like the Matrix. The cops actually came to the hospital, saw me, and said, "Who the hell are you? You see your video footage? You put 6 guys in each ambulance, and you filled 6 ambulances with 6 guys each." And I said to Chicago, I just had to kill people, man. There's like diarrhea, you know. And coming down to the point where I got stabbed, I basically there was one guy, he looks at me, and then there was another guy who came at me with a giant rock. He fucking came for my head. I did like an upward block, blocked it. The rock fell out of his hand. I grabbed the rock, and as he's trying to run away, I grab him by his neck and I pin his head on the table. And I don't know. UFC fighters and shit, MMA fighters, we're strong, but when our lives are threatened, we're even stronger. And I freaking pinned this guy's head on the table and held the rock above his head. And the other guys looked and kind of like held off. And one guy took a step. I smashed the rock on the guy's head, and he was gone. And at the same time, one of the other guys stabbed me twice in the side. I fucking dusted the other guy. Looked at the guy with the knife, and he's looking at me, like we're both looking at one another, like it's total like I'm looking at my side. I see the stab wounds. I see his hand with the knife, and he's looking at me like he knows I like I'm about to fuck him up. And I basically said, "No, let's go. You out that door. I'm going out that door." We both, me and him, ran out the same door. I ran over. I fucking just emptied out of that restaurant. Basically, I was looking for a car to flag down. And when I went to flag down the car, another vehicle stopped and 6 guys jump out of the freaking car saying, "Hey, where you going, Dread?" And I said, "Guys, you want to do this?" 2 of the guys rushed me. I freaking threw them over the overpass that I was running over. The other 4 guys, they were trying to get a hold on me. They couldn't get a hold on me. And I basically somebody drove a bystander driving by said, "Yo, leave the guy alone, leave the guy alone." I told the guy, "Drive, drive, drive." And I dove between his steering wheel and him, did a front roll in his passenger seat with $20 in my hand. Take me to the hospital. And then he took me to the hospital.
How many
And he goes,
stitches?
"Yeah." He goes, "Which hospital you want to go to?" I go, "Take me to Jenny Finch Hospital. That's the hospital where I grew up. That's my neighborhood. That's like for anyone who knows Toronto, Canada. That's like the hood."
So how many stitches did you get? How bad was the stab wound?
I went to surgery that night, and
Oh, you had to have surgery, huh?
yeah, and then I was supposed to be in the hospital for monitoring and shit for like 3 days, 5 days. I I I basically doctor came in the morning. I said, "Doc, man, I had McDonald's last night, survived it. I am good to go home."
Okay.
And the doctor looked at me and said, "Yeah, your healing powers are kicking in. You're in crazy shape." And yeah, my friends came in the next day. Their mothers said thank you. Some parents came in and thanked me. Some of my friends came in and cried. I basically said, "Guys, I'm cool, man." And the funny thing was, I was supposed to fight in Tokyo, Japan in 2 weeks. So me being the smart ass I was, got out of the hospital, jumped on the plane to Tokyo, showed up at my own fight night, and everybody thought I dodged the guy who I was supposed to fight. I said, no, I didn't dodge him. I showed them my stab wounds, and they're like, and they interviewed me, did all that. I ended up staying in Japan that time for like 6 weeks, just chilling. And I basically flew back home to Toronto, looked at the plan, realized I'm not ready to go home. Looked at the flights going out. One of them was going to Tel Aviv, and I jumped on the plane and went to Tel Aviv. An interesting thing, and this was the time I basically told my instructor Avi Nardia, I'm coming to Tel Aviv. So I jump on the plane to Tel Aviv, and I get off the plane. As I'm getting off the plane, going up the ramp, two guys take me by the arms and escort me off the plane. And I'm thinking, what the fuck? So they escort me off the plane, and these two guys were from Israeli Secret Service, and basically said, "Hey, you flew from Dubai recently, because at the time you weren't allowed to like fly from that country to another country and then enter Israel. They always flagged you if you flew from any of the middle like Jordan or Syria or any of those, you got flagged. So when I got off the plane in Israel, I was flagged, and they escorted me to the holding room, and basically they were interrogating me and shit. And Avi shows up with another ranking officer from the military, and I remember the ranking officer goes, "You let him go. This guy, this guy's like,
Legit. Yeah.
yeah, he's legit. He'll fuck your shit up." And the guys were, I didn't really, they freaking let me go. I went on. I went with these guys, a military escort out of the airport. They took me right away to barracks where we were training the Mossad unit, and also the Israeli counter terrorist unit was training, and I was just hanging out with them, doing my shit, and these guys were doing their hand-to-hand combat in a tennis court. And then Avi goes, "Hey, Carlos, why don't you show him some stuff?" And I'm looking, I'm thinking, I lift up my shirt, I go, like, I just got stabbed like 6 weeks ago, like my wounds, like I'm not fully like healed,
Healed yet. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
That's funny.
yeah, and he's like, just show them some stuff. I was like, okay, show them some stuff. I was at the time, I was in my 20s, early 20s, and these guys weren't taking me seriously. They were looking at me like, what are you gonna teach us? We're like, we just finished killing dudes yesterday. What are you gonna teach us? So I said, okay, you're not gonna listen. Okay, let's me and you spar. I picked one of them and said, hey, let's me and you spar. Let's just work it. All right. And he's trying to hit me. We're working. He goes to throw a knee. I make him knee himself in the head. So he gives himself a bloody nose. And I kind of play smart, like, I didn't do it, but I made you do it.
That's
and
funny.
and basically, this guy turns out to be no match for me. The whole unit starts screaming, Uzi, 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 like chanting Uzi. And this big dude gets up. He has like two sidearms. He's got magazines in his boots. He empties out all of his weapons, steps on the mats, and we go at it. I get to mount position, and now while I'm in mount, I explain to them, this is what you do to someone in mount. And that's the moment I started teaching. I finished teaching that session that day. A corporal showed up. I'm going home. He goes, you ain't going home. You're staying with us, man. I stayed in Tel Aviv University. I stayed with the dean of dentistry at his house as a personal guest. And I taught the Israeli Secret Service for 6 months.
That's cool. That's cool. Well, here,
until I was all healed up, fresh, ready to go back home.
That's good. So, John Perretti, April 26, 1996, Extreme Fighting Battlecade. If you're listening to this program, you know that it for sure took years off of your life, and it was probably one of the more incredible moments of just crossing a finish line against all odds. But Carlos Newton makes his MMA debut there. How do you find Carlos?
Let me prerequisite the whole thing by saying it was a debacle, and it was a purposeful debacle, and that it was a horrendous time for Donald Zuckerman and I. They're all orchestrated by the UFC. And we had customs against us, we had immigration against us, we had all kinds of stuff going on. And the Kanawagi basically saved us and Donald Zuckerman. But it was a very difficult situation, and Carlos was a savior because Carlos was ready to fight, and unfortunately he had to fight out of his weight class that I had just created the show before. So he had to fight Jean Rivière, or am I mispronouncing it, Carlos?
Yeah, Jean Rivière.
And it is easily one of the most heroic efforts that I had ever seen in my life. And I had a basis for judgment. It was so overwhelming and cathartic because he wasn't just fighting for the show, he was fighting for the sport. Because with the failure of Extreme Fighting 2 and then the great shows of Extreme Fighting 3 and 4 would not have occurred without Carlos Newton. And what happened on that show. And so it is like, and I'm sure you've watched it now, Mike, right, Joey?
I've watched it several times, of course.
So when you see something like this where someone is so stoic and so geared towards doing what he knew best how to do, and you have this other juggernaut who was a massive man. First of all, I forgot what he weighed, Carlos.
He was 285.
Yeah, he was huge. He was huge.
285.
And wait, John, I think you guys lied about Carlos's weight too. I think he
absolutely.
Was, yeah, you guys totally lied about his weight. Okay, go ahead.
Absolutely. But the real thing is that he wasn't just, and you can interject, Carlos, but he wasn't just 285. He was 285 and didn't gas.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, I mean, Carlos, right? Like when I watched the fight unfold, I kept thinking, "This is your moment. This wasn't his moment. It was yours." You know, Gene was doing what he was supposed to do, and like you're a guy that you gotta put you away, because if you don't, you're coming back. Like you're not going away. You're not going anywhere. So you can't let somebody like you hang around. And for Gene not to gas out, it was shocking. But I think in that loss, you made more of a name for yourself than anybody else around that time period. You know, it was the first time you saw somebody's stock go up in a loss, at least in the sport of mixed martial arts, that I can recall.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Carlos, open up on that. What did you think about the fight?
For myself, being, pretty much my first fight ever. I thought I did great. I thought that was what Bushido was all about for me. That was the spirit of the samurai.
Wait. So, John, the fight card's falling apart.
Hang on a second.
Go ahead.
What he's saying is so important. I don't want to, run over it. What he's saying is that he was doing what he thought that he had to do what he loved to do. And I think that's critical, because he represented mixed martial arts so early on in such a beautiful way, and it created the boundaries of it. I mean, you can ask people what mixed martial arts means. I can tell you because I coined it. But really, you have to understand that it's a sport that intermingles things, and today it's homogenous, but it intermingles things at that point in time, and he was indicative of the 60% rule of what it intermingled.
Yeah. So Carlos, how about this? You show up at the venue, you hear guys are getting arrested at the airport, guys are showing up, Orlando Week shows up, looks at, his opponent, leaves, and you're backstage. Who was your original opponent? Do you remember?
You know what? Can't remember who the original opponent was. Yeah. Yeah.
That's the one question that
Wait, I got it.
Go ahead.
I'll have it.
Okay, keep thinking. So Carlos, you show up backstage, you're hearing this person's gone, that person's gone, this person got stopped at the airport, they're threatening jail time for everybody. I mean, and that's, you haven't even made the walk for your first fight yet. Like, the chaos and BS backstage, I think would have driven the majority of today's martial artists. They just would have left. What do you recall about the chaos backstage prior to your fight?
I remember actually feeling very Canadian. that I definitely remember feeling very Canadian on a reservation, and how this place was a whole nother little world unto itself, and I actually felt pretty safe there. I felt safe from authorities. I really did. Yeah. Knowing the legalities of the situation, right? And somewhat, I felt cool with it. I wasn't going into the U.S. I couldn't be arrested for just wanting to enter the U.S. because we weren't on U.S. soil. I wasn't doing anything illegal in the U.S. So all these American guys coming in and having a tough time and so forth. That's just for me. I felt like that was a pretty desperate attempt by whatever authorities, or whoever was pulling the strings behind the scenes, trying to do what they were doing. Yeah.
Well, on Kanawagi, we had Mike Thomas, so he's Mohawk, and we had him, and he is today still an incredible stand-up guy, and I care about him immensely. But the police department there, head of the police department that got everybody arrested initially, that guy went on to move to Montreal and got a huge promotion for doing what he did. So they gifted him a new position because of what he did, which was illegal. And so we had a good group of tight people together, and again, Zuckerman was a magician, and he actually brought a new dish from out west across Canada to put it up so that we could be live. We had nobody in the booth. I couldn't hear anybody, the commentators. I mean, I couldn't hear anybody speaking. It was truly a debacle. But the heroics of Carlos Newton will never be overstated because it was the show.
Yeah. No, Carlos, it really was, man. It was the only fight that made it past a minute. And if you bought the pay-per-view like myself, that one match alone was worth the price of admission. Phenomenal. So, John, you were so impressed, you also brought him over to the Contenders. With Chris Barnes was his opponent.
Right. So I mean, in my opinion, I constantly wanted to give back to Carlos Newton.
Yeah.
I don't know if Carlos feels the same way, but that was my intention over and over and over. Because technically, he was very different and very acrobatic. And I don't know if what you did besides dance before 17, Carlos.
I don't know. I did a lot of things, man. But gymnastics was part of them.
But he was so acrobatic. I mean, he's done unheard of things still, which are looked at, that people don't even understand in terms of reversals. But yeah, so he fought on the greatest show that no one ever watched.
Familiar with that. I'm actually familiar with that. Like people not watching, like what we're doing right now. So Carlos Newton, the Contenders. You guys are in was it Sioux Falls or Sioux City? I think it was Sioux City, Iowa, correct?
I think it's Sioux City.
And it was attended by absolute legends and studs of the wrestling world. And you get a spot on it.
I think it was the greatest card ever at that point in time.
It was the first paid submission grappling card, pro submission grappling card. So Carlos, what do you recall about that?
It was an interesting show. I had a great time. At the time too, I feel like the whole thing was a bit ahead of its time, because now guys are trying to do the same thing. But in between then and now, none of that happened. So it was quite interesting. I have my experience of the sport has been very, very, very unique. I feel like I've had experiences that no other fighter will ever have. I experienced no holds barred, and I experienced MMA. I experienced fighting with guys like Randy Couture, on undercards, and fighting with guys like Randy Couture on headliner big shows. Right. I fought in Japan and the US. I fought for the UFC and Pride when there were different owners under contract with both promotions at the same time. All right. I've been.
Yeah, no, you've been there and done that. Here, and look,
been able to see things in a different light, different perspective.
So let me kind of further that point for our listeners at home. Around this time, the under 200-pound world champion, you could say, was Erik Paulson in Shudo. And your second fight is against him in Valley Tudo, Japan, November 29th, 1997. It was a non-title fight, though. Why was that a non-title fight between you and Paulson?
Because under Shudo rules, I couldn't be a valid contender, I believe, because I wasn't ranked Shudo's number one. Right? Shudo followed their rankings like a proper sport. And then the guy who's ranked number one contender should have the right to fight Erik for the title, not me. And also, I was a last minute replacement for Erik's actual opponent. I wasn't some guy, with 6 months notice. Erik was supposed to fight someone else. I was a lucky break for me. I remember I was in Richmond Hill, Ontario, Canada, and one day after training with my, sweating, Moni calls me into the office and basically says, I just got a call from Japan. It's very short notice. Think about it. If you say no, I'm in total agreement with it, and so forth. And I go, where's the fight? He goes, Tokyo. I was like, well, when am I gonna get another chance to go to Tokyo? Let's go.
What did it pay you? What did it pay you?
I can't remember, man. But I remember it was decent. I didn't mind at all.
Erik Paulson was making around $3,000 to $5,000 a fight as their champion.
Yeah. Well, I think he made more that night.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I definitely made more than that.
So Erik Paulson,
Shudo Japan.
he's the Shudo champion, the greatest under 200-pound fighter in the world at this time. How did the fight end?
I know how the fight started. Yeah, it was pretty.
Armbar, 41 seconds.
Yeah. I just kept cool, man.
So we got an 0-1 guy from Canada
Mhm.
flying to fight the number one under 200 pounder in the world, and you beat him in under a minute.
Well, I came off I thought I came off a pretty decent performance against a guy who outweighed me by 105 pounds.
It's still your
So,
second fight. It's your second
I was
fight.
actually, yeah, but I was actually more afraid of the giant crowd than Erik at the time. And I was actually more afraid of Erik's experience, his level of experience, than maybe actual Erik himself. For me, he weighed, he was, he weighed 100 pounds less than the other guy, than the last guy I fought. So it's gonna be that bad. I was much more worried about Erik's experience over me and so forth. Yeah, it was only my second fight. I was kind of like, what do I know? And I was kind of like, man, that guy must know everything. And I remember almost like in a almost to the level of a hypnotic state, rehearsing my head movements, my shoots, you know, it's just rehearsing my movement, my game plan, and and that was that, and exactly how the fight came out. Just following. My head just moved. I didn't even think about it. My head just moved. He threw a punch, and my head moved, and he did. He didn't hit me once, and I was in there, quick, fast, down, and yeah, got it done.
Yeah, that was incredible. I remember, I was a Carlos Duke fan after watching, Extreme Fighting 2. And when I saw that result, I was shocked. It was pretty shocking. You jumped in line. There's sometimes the guys kind of jump in line and people are like, wait a minute. You jumped in line and you got to win it under a minute. John,
And
representing
Carlos,
that of yourself, what'd you think of that?
Of him beating Erik Paulson?
At the time, yeah.
Oh, I thought, Erik Paulson was, and I know it as a fact, was incredibly well-rounded. He could do anything with style. And I was a big fan, all the time. But you have to understand that Newton beats a lot of people with a straight arm bar as he moves on.
Yeah.
And
it's his bread and butter.
There's a methodology there that's so sound. It's not like Fabiano Iha, beats everybody with a straight arm bar. It's really a guy who utilizes what he has at such a high level that it's very difficult to deal with. So just because you have a lot of tools and they're all really, really fucking good, but when you're a thoroughbred like he is, and you have 2 or 3 tools that are so superior, it's a very difficult animal to fight.
Yeah. Yeah, Carlos, when you left the ring that night, did you feel kind of like a national hero of Japan? Because everybody knew Paulson, and you came in and spoiled it.
I just felt like some guy that was from a small island, was born on a small island, grew up in Canada, loving martial arts, and finally in the land of martial arts. I was just loving it. Yeah, I only knew 2 things as a kid growing up: dinosaurs and samurai. That was it. Yeah.
2 very important things. Very important things.
Yeah, especially when you're Yeah, well, I came to Canada. I was 9 years old. I swear to God. By the time I came to Canada, I only knew two things: dinosaurs and samurais. Those are the only books I read. I swear to God. I was already I was at 9 years old. I was a paleontologist and a Japanese historian.
That's excellent. You fight in Israel, Haim, Goziel. You win by armbar, and then you wind up back in Japan again. Kazuhiro Kasiyanagi. So you're back in Japan, starting to make a name for yourself. Is this when you start kind of learning the language, or was it afterward?
Oh, but I was ready. I was deep into anime by that time. Yeah, I was a bit of an anime freak. I was into anime before people knew what mainstream what anime was, and a lot of my Japanese came from just watching that stuff. Uh, and also at the time too, I met I met someone, Yoshi Tanaka, and he's been a mentor. He's basically family to me. Um, and you know, I I call him. He is my godfather. Anyone asks when he's in my presence or he's not in my presence, someone says, "Who's that gentleman?" I said, "That's my godfather, Mr. Tanaka." And he started teaching me Japanese. He was a news reporter for a Japanese newspaper that and here in Canada that circulated amongst the Japanese community, and he would come and do interviews with me and so forth. Especially when I was heading off to Japan to compete, he would come and
Yeah.
do an interview.
Yeah, the Toronto area's got a lot of people from Japan there. So you must have been a little local hero as well. Here's the interesting thing. So that Shudo event, obviously won by armbar, was March 1st, 1998. On March 20th, 1998, you grapple in the first ever ADCC.
Yeah.
Was it a last minute invite?
Was that last minute invite? Felt like it. Yeah. Yeah. I kind of somehow got on their radar. They wanted all the top guys, all the top grapplers in the world at their show, and I must have earned myself a spot on that.
Okay.
At the time too, I met a couple of guys, in town too. By that time, I met Hicks and Gracie and other guys like that. Started learning things from them and started to get some roots and make some connections with the Brazilian community. All right, and maybe somebody passed my name around also, and maybe endorsed my name, for an invitation, and then I ended up getting an invite.
Okay. Do you remember who your roommate was?
My roommate in Abu
They,
Dhabi.
they flew all you guys in, and then they kind of paired everybody up, whether you knew them or not. Everybody had a roommate.
Oh my gosh, I can't remember who my roommate was.
Okay. Okay. Well, you do pretty good. Yeah. Andre Anderson, you win by choke, and then you go up against Rodrigo Gracie. Obviously, you lost on that one, but it certainly was a good introduction to the family that became acquainted with that of yourself.
Yeah. They play a real slick game. They were in the grappling game for a long time. They knew how to play the rules and everything. I was just a guy that went for it. I just went for it, and I ended up losing by a few points, and by a decision. But for myself too, I felt I was just so young and starting off, and coming from what for me obviously was a pretty small pond and being
Mhm.
thrown into an ocean like that. I was pretty happy with how I was swimming. I was pretty happy to swim with the big fish and
That's
hold
good.
my own. All right,
That's
and
good.
that I felt very validated that all the dedication I put into learning the martial arts paid off.
You the names on your record really, really jump off. Like it's like you've literally been in there with some of the greatest fighters in the world. May 15th, 1998, UFC 17. You enter a four-man tournament. Bob Gilstrap is your first opponent. You dispose of him with the triangle choke 52 seconds. And you wind up against Dan Henderson in the tournament finals.
Yeah.
Little controversial. No,
it was a great fight. To Dan being a stand-up guy that he was, every time we meet, when we even met years later, he always told me, "Yeah, you kicked ass in that fight. You made a loss on record, but look what you did." I remember he popped out his jaw, and he showed me that I broke his jaw in 3 places. He had surgery on his jaw the next day.
So
he basically said, "You didn't lose, man. You did great."
John Perretti?
So I'd like to interject. So I am sitting ringside for that match with Boss Bruton. He's on my right, and Boss and I were really close then. And Carlo does this reversal in the air, and I watch it occur with Dan, and Dan is, controlled. As a Greco-Roman guy, he controlled the stand-up grappling aspect of life. And Carlos makes this reversal in the air, and I don't need, neither Boss, and we're shoulder to shoulder, neither Boss or I take our eyes off the thing, and I go, "Hey, Boss, you ever see that before?" He goes, "Nope." I said, "Me neither." And we never looked at each other. And it was so acrobatic and unprecedented, that even in the vernacular of these retarded mixed martial arts people today, I don't see how they could even articulate what he actually did. Can you try to explain what happened, Carlos?
That for me, I watch that counter all the time. I remember even I literally felt in midair, I earned a little bit of respect from Dan Henderson at that moment.
And everybody else in the fucking audience.
That moment, I remember thinking, "Wow, I could at least counter this wrestling." And I knew his wrestling is phenomenal. I knew that
Phenomenal.
before even stepping in, phenomenal. But in that moment, I felt like I earned a little bit of his respect on the wrestling side right in that instant, because I felt the takedown coming. I was like, counter, and I in a very very Aikido, go with the flow, one with the spirit type of way. The counter came to me in the instant it was needed, and ended up just taking that momentum and making it my own to wind up that takedown, so he didn't dump me on my head and just clear me for side control. Which, if I didn't come up with him, I'm pretty sure that's what would have happened.
Yeah, you were in trouble.
He would have just double legged me on and ended up with side control. I needed some way to kill it and at a minimum or throw him off his game plan, which was just a straightforward double leg.
And let's talk about how tough Dan Henderson is. He goes into overtime. It goes in over.
By far the toughest guy I've ever fought. Toughest guy in MMA for me. At least one of the toughest by far.
Yeah, he goes into overtime and wins a split decision over Alan Goes in his first
with
bout.
A broken jaw. Against me with a broken jaw. He basically went the distance with a broken jaw.
Yeah. It was that exchange happened in the beginning of the fight, and you cracked him so hard you broke his jaw, and he just the mental toughness of Dan Henderson is something that very few people in this world are able to have. It's just mental tough.
Yeah, well, if you actually see, there's a time when I hit Dan with a right hook, and you hear a crack. At least I heard the crack, and I paused for a moment because I thought that crack was my hand. I only learned later it was his jaw. But you could actually see me hesitate for a second, like, what's going on? I see him wobble, but I stop because I'm like, what's going on? Did I just break my hand? And I realized, oh, he's really hurt. My hand doesn't feel messed up, and and that was it. Yeah, but I actually paused for a second because
Yeah.
the moment I hit him, I heard the loudest crack. I could have swore it was my hand. I could have swore I just like I can just I don't know broke my
Well,
hand and
well,
went in pieces.
speaking for Dan Henderson, and myself, as an example, I've broken my jaw twice, and every time it made it a horrendous crack. So Dan knew that you broke his jaw instantaneously.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's got 2 split decision victories in a 4-man tournament. Like he's built for that format. Like the guy had a half hour fighting. He had a half hour fighting in one night.
Yeah, he's tough as fuck.
Yeah. So we talked about big names that kind of jump off, jump off the page. Your next opponent, June 24th, 1998, Pride 3, Sakuraba.
Yeah.
They're not, dude, these people are not your friend. They're not your friend.
No. I think by the time Sakuraba fight came up, I was starting to figure out how this sport worked. I was starting to get a hint of it, and started to question some things. But yeah, the Sakuraba fight was an interesting point in my life. Yeah, I think 2 weeks before that fight, I broke up with someone. I broke up in a relationship that totally just broke my heart. The interesting, funny thing is that kid that you saw at the beginning of the interview is who I have that child with now. That person, came back into my life. But that person, you just saw that little, my little boy, that's the mother of my son. She's the number one reason, and you call it whatever you call it, but everyone who knew me at the time knew she was the number one reason you lost that fight. My head just wasn't in it. I just wasn't there.
Right.
Yeah.
Here, first, it's probably one of the top 5 like grapple heavy matches. Not a lot of punches, if any, were thrown.
That was Carlos Newton on autopilot, guys. I literally, I was.
So there was no gentleman's agreement. There was
nothing. No, zero.
It was just happenstance.
But
my Japanese wasn't that good then. Trust me.
But he's sitting there and alluding to there being agreements between others.
Yeah, there was no agreement between me and Sakuraba. We just did it. We just did what we did. Yeah, and quite frankly too, I really did enjoy the fight. All right, just if I was a lot more focused and so forth, I think it could have been a lot more intense. But in terms of the flow, the grappling flow, and so forth, I don't know. I watched it too. It was a moment of grappling where really my body was just doing this thing, and I think if I could tap into that at will, I'll be amazing all the time. If I could tap into that type of flow. But there was such there was 2 people in that ring. There was the fighter Carlos Newton who was just doing his thing, and then there was Carlos Newton who was dealing with this personal, turmoil in the back of his head. All right. Yeah. I at the time, guys, I was truly in love with this person, and I was still just a distracted kid in that ring.
Okay.
Yeah, I was one of those guys. Like, I always say to my coaches and so forth, and there was a time when guys had, boxers have the luxury of really pacing their careers because they're in full control of their careers the way the sport's structured.
Or somebody is.
Yeah, or somebody is, other than somebody who shouldn't be.
That's right.
All right. Somebody, with a fiduciary duty to them is in charge of it. All right. And yeah, they have the ability to pace their careers and peak at the right time, and peak for certain fights at the right time, and so forth. And in MMA, we never had that luxury. And I'm one of those guys that, for me, I know I just climbed too fast, in the sense that my talents as a martial artist was is not a good mix for a sport like mixed martial arts, with the structure it has, with the exploitive structure that it has. It just makes it easier for promoters to, burn out your shelf life that much faster, and squeeze the value out of you before you, in the blink of an eye, and next thing you know, your career is over. And for me, growing up and coming up in the sport, I think I caught on to that pretty quick, that was the nature of it. And like you say, there came a time, and you can probably see it reflected in my career. I started to really make a concerted effort to keep a certain balance, so that if I didn't feel like I wasn't being successful as a fighter or whatever, I just did not want to close other avenues and neglect other, talents I might have, or talents that I may not even discover that I've had. I didn't just want to be a one-trick pony. And because I've seen guys get released from contract and cry. I've seen guys do that. I've seen guys post about how, pissed off they are. I've seen guys complain and gripe. I just said, you know what? I don't know if I can go finish my. I'm gonna go do psychology. I'm gonna take architecture, learn design houses. I'm gonna sue these fuckers.
Well, Carlos, you do not do interviews.
I'll tell you too. This was the moment I decided I was gonna sue them. I was at home one day in Newmarket, Ontario, at my house in Newmarket. I received in the mail a check from Zuffa LLC, the UFC, for a royalty check of $500 for being in the video game. I didn't cash that check, guys. I tore it up, and I hit my law books.
Hey, Carlos.
And that you know what that $500 cost them? It cost them $335 million. That's what.
Hey, Carlos, I was in the video game and they never sent me a check.
Yeah, I didn't take the $500. I did not cash the check. Yeah, I remember the person who called me, asked me for my address. Oh, please give us, verified my address, sent a check, and I didn't know what they were sending me. I just said, "What? They want my address to send me something? Here's my address. Sure, have at it." Showed up, thinking instead of $500, I was like, "Man, this sport's really fucked up." And I basically said, "All right, I know what's wrong. I put my, I explained to you guys right at the beginning what's inherently anti-competitive about the sport, why it's monopolistic. It's by default creates a monopoly. Is there's no sport in the world where there's a proper regulator. Does a promoter have their own title, have the ability to sanction their own title, and have exclusive contracts with an athlete or with the athletes at the same time? There's no sport in the world structured like that."
Yeah.
And
Okay. Yeah.
at that moment, knowing that was the case, I just started looking for a lawyer.
That's good. That's good. So your next bout is against former Shudo champion Kenji Kawaguchi. Like, you're fighting a murderer's row. Like, you've not had an easy fight yet.
Yeah. Like I said, there are things about the sport that clued into me. Boxers, they look after their own interests, and because every boxer, each individual athlete that is a boxer, has the ability to look after their individual interests 100% in their own interest, the two boxers balance out one another, right? And that balance, that 100% duty to look out for their own interests, is what actually creates a balanced competition, right? And allows boxing to evolve in a certain way. MMA, a lot of guys think they're seeing the best fights. They're not. They're not seeing the best fights. They're seeing the fights that the promoter wants to cash in on. That's what they're seeing. That's what they're saying. They're being entertained, but they're not seeing the best fighters. They're not seeing the athletes at their best.
On May 13, 2000, you fought at WEF, World Extreme Fighting. Jamie Levine is the promoter. How was your dealings with him?
Yeah, Jamie. He seemed to treat me better than other guys. I know in the end. Yeah, because I got some of my money.
Some of it?
Yeah. Some of it. A lot of guys walked away empty-handed. Yeah, that was something else.
John Perretti, I think you were at this event.
I believe I was a referee.
Did you get paid?
I didn't get paid.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, good old Jamie Levine. Good old Jamie.
Jamie Levine was a big Disney guy.
Well, I mean, he was a registered sex offender before he died, so that would all make sense.
Oh God.
He's a big Disney guy.
Was
He
a big Disney
Jamie
guy.
Levine passed away?
Man, gone.
I didn't know that.
He's dead?
Yeah, he's on the other side of the grass. 100%.
I didn't know that. When did he die?
Oof. Years ago, over 10 years.
And how did he die?
Heart attack.
In jail?
No, he did a little bit of time. It was a investor in his company's daughter. Like he gives this thing where I was in a bar, it was 21 and over. I had no idea. Like what, anytime you meet a pedophile, whatever their story is, it's always, man, it was just this weird set of circumstances. And oftentimes it's much different than reality. And Jamie didn't allow reality to get in the way of his good story. Yeah, we've had people on here defending him. Monty Cox swears he was a great guy. Hey, listen,
come on, Monty's not going to say that in front of me.
He did.
That's cock.
He definitely said it on our program.
I'll debate him on that.
I think it would be a very easy victory for you, John. So Carl Schmidt, you win. Here's the thing about the Carl Schmidt fight. It's the first walkout it was the first reference of Dragon Ball Z jiu-jitsu. I had not heard it in your fights prior to that.
Yeah, that came from my friends in Japan. They basically dared me to say it.
Oh, it was just pretty. It's good. It's good.
It was an homage to my.
It sounds very anime.
Yeah, it was basically a shout out to the guys at the Shudo gyms in Japan that I trained with. They basically, I remember one sparring session in one of the rings, we were talking about Dragon Ball, and then when the guy said, "I dare you say it, Carlos, you gotta say it," I was like, "Okay, I promise I'll say it." I remember. You got my camaraderie in those gyms was interesting because I was the only foreigner in those gyms, and my Japanese was next to nothing at that point in time. So a lot of the ways we communicated and just had fun was with these little side things, and as a way of saying, I heard you guys, we're friends for life. Dragon Ball Z Jiu-Jitsu. And that was that. And,
you were
awesome.
You were on quite a roll. You started with Kawaguchi, armbar, Matsui, decision, Carl Schmidt, you beat him, Sano, armbar, and then you roll into Johil de Oliveira. So Johil is a smaller guy, but representing that Luta Libre flag, he is an absolute legend in the sport. You got mount pretty quick. Hold up. One second. You got Mount pretty quick in that one. What was your feelings about Johil?
Um, from the Lucha Libre gang, and with the Marco Ruas crowd, I basically was like, these guys are good fighters. Again, this is small pond, big ocean type of scenario, and but at this time too, I'm rolling. I'm hanging with the guys, training with the big fighters, and just gotta have a little bit more faith in my skills and trust, that I'm swimming in the big, I'm swimming in the big ocean, holding my own. And Joe Hill for me was the first guy who I fought that was anywhere near my weight class.
Yeah.
Naturally, we're basically naturally the same weight, and yeah, so I was actually quite surprised how much my own weight felt so light to me. if I could put it that way.
John Perretti.
All right.
Yeah, so I know him. Obviously, I know the Little Libre guys really, really well. I have incredible respect, but you were twice as strong as him.
Yeah.
But that's the thing.
I mean, he
On
was
a scale-
spindly by comparison.
No, but on the scale, we're like the same weight class and everything. But
That's not what I said.
I know, I hear what you said. Trust me. But at the same time, it's like when a guy who can walk around at like 170 and I'm at 170, for me it felt different. Going from yeah, I felt like my career weight wise was completely backwards. I went from super heavy and got progressively lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter and more in line. I typically almost always fought people who are just slightly naturally heavier than me. And, whether because they're taller than me, so they would look a little bigger. Like I've also been always smaller in volume for my weight. Like now I could easily touch 240, but you put me inside a guy who weighs 240 and they look twice as big as me. I have a certain muscle density that maybe that's what you're alluding to, way stronger. I just didn't feel way stronger.
I'm not alluding.
I'm trying to say I didn't feel like I was way stronger. I just felt like he was way weaker than what
I think that's the same statement. Carlos.
No, it's not. It's not. Because when you have a guy when you're fighting guys like Dan Henderson and stuff, and these guys are they're lean, big, solid guys. You coming in there against a guy who's naturally 170 it was a different animal.
Wait,
it's the same. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Go ahead, John.
It's the same kind of thing. You feel good walking around at 170. I was 170 pounds, not as a kickboxer, but as a grappler. And then you go up against Miletich, and Miletich is, it's down to 170.
Well,
and realize how weak I am.
We got to build that, John, before we skip ahead like that. So Dave Manet you fight him in the Shidokan Jitsu. And Dave Manet is a first ballot Hall of Famer that gets largely ignored by UFC history. In terms of all-time greats in the 185-pound weight class, in my opinion, he should be in that top 10 somewhere. Maybe on the lower end, but he definitely fits in that top 10.
Yeah.
It's a very tough fight for you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You wind up with Pat Miletich, May 4th, 2001, UFC 31. You become a world champion, man. I mean, this is all the bells and whistles, dreams. This is usually the highlight of a movie.
Yeah. It's just I wasn't buying it. Because I knew I wasn't in control. I knew I wasn't picking my next opponent. I knew I wasn't shaping my career. I knew I wasn't deciding when I was stepping up, or I knew they weren't negotiating and competing against other people for my next bout. It wasn't lost on me, man. I was a young guy, but I think I probably had a knack. I probably had a knack for the business acumen that at the time I probably didn't even know how to articulate.
Okay.
You know,
So
and
you win by
yeah, it just
bulldog
took me a
choke.
while.
Yeah, become a
Yeah.
world champion, man.
Yeah, it's all good.
And then there's a transition from SEG to Zuffa.
Mm-hmm.
So you meet the new boss. There goes the old boss. You meet the new boss,
Yeah,
and
right away you can feel the shift. You can feel everything. You just just even that transition, just the way I'm like, huh, this doesn't happen in boxing. Promoters don't buy titles in boxing.
well, they forced Pat Miletich up a weight class in order to avoid a rematch. They put Matt Hughes in there, probably one of the all-time greatest UFC fights ever. Definitely one of the top 5 ever, title fights ever. And you're one half of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Even the way that fight went down, I realized, huh, the sport, we're we're doing professional wrestling when we hit one another for real. That's what this sport is.
Yes, sir.
It's structured like professional wrestling where we punch and hurt one another for real.
Carlos, that's what they told me. We're going to model this after WWE. And I said, what? And he said, we're going to own all the fighters. And I said, you're going to own the fighters, then you're going to own the results.
Yeah.
I don't want any part of it.
So, Carlos, you got him in a triangle. The controversy is you're up against the cage. You're kind of holding onto the cage so you don't drop.
I know it wasn't so much that I don't drop. Dude, there's like so much I can go on. I said he's gonna pass out. I literally said that to John. We're talking, we're having a conversation. John's saying, "Let go of the cage." I said he's gonna pass out. He's passing out. And John's like, "Let go of the cage or I'll disqualify you." And I literally said, "All right, hold on." Freaking. And what everyone thinks it's Matt Hughes taking a step back. No, it's Matt Hughes collapsing. And yeah, I got the weight of me and him coming down, and I hit my head. And right away, rightfully so, they panic and run over to look see if I'm okay. And yeah, in the meantime, Matt wakes up and he wakes up the champion. And
He gets informed he won. He didn't
yeah,
know he
yeah,
won. He
yeah,
was
he didn't even
informed.
know, right? And I remember too, like how Lorenzo and the guys handled it was like they knew basically I got screwed. They basically said, why don't you take a break? Why don't you go fight in Japan for a while? And right there I was like, huh, interesting. You guys are telling me what to do, like you're my manager. And I'm like, these are conversations I should be having with that person, not you. The sport's totally messed up. The structure of it's totally messed up. And yeah, even the way, I don't fault anyone. The sport was, the sport is still very young. We've had UFC 300. That's only UFC 300, right? We're talking about a sport that can have thousands of promoters and multiple sanctioning bodies all participating at the same time. We don't have that yet. The day that happens, this sport will explode. It will explode on a whole nother level.
So
we may not have every show being a big UFC blockbuster. Every show won't be like that, but the blockbusters that will happen will count for something.
Yeah,
they will have real meaning.
So Hughes was out first. You were out second. They raised Matt's hand. Shortly thereafter, you fight Jose Pelelandi, who was also top 5 in the world at this time. He beat Pat Miletich outside of the UFC while Pat was champion in Jamie Levine's show. And it's an incredible come from behind victory on your end.
Pele was a great fight. Man, he was an awesome fighter, man. I have a picture of him on my fridge, knee me in the chin.
Oh,
Yeah, I want to know what you thought of him.
For me, that fight was won outside the ring during one of our press conferences. Basically, we're at a press conference, and my coach Everton says to me, "Hey, Carlos, Pele won't stop staring at you. He won't stop he won't. He's like intensely staring at you from the five, 6 chairs over. He's leaning forward in his chair, staring at me, and won't break his stare. I didn't know he was staring at me. My coaches said he's staring at you still. I go, he's staring at me? Like, yeah, he's staring at you like he wants to kill you. I said, really? So I lean forward and I stare at him back. I keep I just like freaking like Vangelis Silva would. I just stared at him.
Yeah.
I did. I just stared at him, gave him the same axe murderer look he was trying to give me. Stared at him, and he leaned back in his chair. For the rest of the trip, while we're in the hotel, while we're walking around, he never looked at me again. Even at the weigh-in, he didn't look at me.
Wow.
Yeah.
You ate a hellacious knee. He was very kind of cocky and arrogant, waving his fingers at you.
Yeah, I felt like I won after I took that knee. I felt like I won the fight, quite frankly.
Man, dude,
Yeah,
you ate that like a champ.
Yeah. I gave him a thumbs up. I was like, okay, now it's on. That's interesting. For me, I felt like a battle tank. I was like, oh, you can't pierce my armor. You're in trouble.
UFC 38 was July 13th, 2002, UFC 38. It was the first show in London. You headline with Matt Hughes. Let's talk about something that happened outside of the event. Lee Murray, Tito Ortiz street fight was that night.
Yeah.
Do you recall hearing anything about that?
Yeah. Didn't care. I remember hearing things about that. You know what's interesting? That UFC event was the only UFC event where there was a sanctioned body involved. Yeah, a lot of people.
The BBBC, huh?
Yes.
The British Board of Boxing Council,
Yeah.
I think it.
Yes, that was the only sanctioned body. That was the only event where there was a sanctioned body involved to sanction the event and put up a title. Meaning, that was the only event in UFC history that took place structured like a boxing event would be in North America. There was the government, who's the proper regulator, and then there was a licensed sanctioning body involved and a licensed promoter. That UFC in London was the only one that ever took place like that. I remember seeing it on their face too. Let's just do this, get it over with. We're out of here after that. Yeah, it was written all over their face. They didn't want anything to do with a sanctioning body. Telling them, who's ranked what, who fights when, who's in line to fight for what. They wanted nothing to do with rankings and anyone putting up a title. They wanted nothing to do with that. They couldn't run so fast. They couldn't run fast enough in the other direction. Yeah.
Let's talk about some of former training partners. Shawn Tompkins.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a great trainer, man. Yeah, everyone loved him. Yeah, he put out a crazy stable of guys, who just machines, man. Mark
Homegrown.
Mark Hominick. Yeah, and homegrown is perfect words. These guys, they were poster boys for where they came from, and really the best of the best. They had the best, showcase the best qualities of where they were from, and they were the type of guys, the type of guys you make movies about, going off to war and coming back.
Carlos, it's the first, I use quote unquote super gym that was created with all people within driving distance of the facility.
Yeah. Team Tompkins. Yeah. Tompkins himself, he was just a great coach. He just, yeah, he was a machine, and he set a good example for the guys training wise, and taught them good skills. They're very good.
What about Everton McEwan?
Yeah, Everton. Yeah, my coach Everton. He passed away. Uh, you know, just under a year ago, and yeah, we miss him like crazy still. And for me, he truly was like the first Jedi I ever met in the martial arts. He was a master. Uh, truly, you know, top five in the world that showed me what mastery looks and feels like, what it moves like, what it sounds like, what it looks like, and yeah, that impression is one that I only hope, and one of my, my deepest dreams and wishes is that my kids can witness that and see that, whether in myself or in anyone else, to see what complete complete oneness with God-given skill and awareness can do, and just see that beauty in it. Everton, yeah, and the amount of joy that he brought to people's lives through the sport of the martial arts was just amazing. I've seen everyone from the most talented to the least talented feel like a superstar, feel like a champ every time they trained with him.
Excellent. John Perretti, we broke the 90-minute mark. Why don't you close us out?
Well, I have to say that the sobriety of Carlos is so still enchanting to me. He produces an aura that I see as really a and I don't want to use the word bushido. He throws that around, but it goes way beyond the limitations of the Japanese. It he really encompasses the martial artist, and he resembles that to me in a very special way. And I have a basis for judgment.
Yeah,
And
Carlos.
it's just been an honor from the very first moment, and I hope that he doesn't include me in the hierarchy of use, misuse, and abuse of the athletes.
Oh no, John. For for this sport, it wouldn't be here without you. And many guys, that will come after you. We do our job. You're one of the giants.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, John, I think
yeah.
you would have received a legal letter had he thought it otherwise. Anyway, John, stick around. Carlos Newton, you do not do interviews. I have sent you dozens of emails, and this man right here, John Perretti, finally delivered you. Man, honestly, truly an honor. I've admired you for many years, and greatly appreciate you being on here, man.
Hey, thank you, Chris.
Thank you, champ.
Thank you, John.
Be good, brother. John Perretti. Man, dude, that's one of the founding fathers, man.
I think it's a great interview, by the way.
Well,
He's just so sober. He's just so groovy.
yeah.
He's a thoroughbred. He's not a guy who did a lot of things, but the things he did it on such a level. And I don't care if he doesn't want to say he was stronger than other people, because he was stronger than all of them.
Yeah. I mean, what he did to Johil de Oliveira, he was in the mount. And dude, let's look here. I made a little list right here. let's just tilt the table. Let's just tilt the table a little bit his way. He was almost the Shudo under 200-pound tournament champion, 183 pounds, against Erik Paulson. Because he wasn't ranked, he didn't get the title. The UFC,
like, that's an organization.
Okay, wait.
That's not an organization.
Erik Paulson was number one. Erik Paulson was number one in the world at that time. I don't care what anybody says. I mean, it's my personal records. Okay,
but that he doesn't get a shot to beat Erik Paulson because of this, that, and the other. That's a bit of caca.
Hey, hold up. Let me finish my statement here. Erik Paulson, he beat. He was not awarded the belt. He should have been, right? The tournament with Dan Henderson was not for a title. Usually tournaments are a time to establish weight classes. Had you tilted the table and he wins that split decision, he's the under 200-pound UFC champion, the tournament champion.
Hang on. Can we stop right there just for a second, though? The only reason there was a tournament still because there was this archaic thing in their minds that they had to do a tournament when everybody else prior to them is now doing matches.
Okay. And the third thing is that he was a UFC 170-pound champion. Like if all of those things come together, those three things come together, I think Carlos Newton is incredibly underappreciated, as a fighter. And if you tilt just two of the three of those things his way, I mean, he's an all-time great.
He's Maurice Smith if you had those three titles.
Yep.
And there's a man who it just stands head and shoulders above most.
I thought you were going to say another guy that's turned us down for multiple requested interviews.
That's true.
I
was not aware of that.
Oh yeah.
I must have to get on the phone.
Yes.
This has really worked out. This is really here's our all-time screw you list. Patrick Cote, number one, first draft pick ever, has confirmed 3 or 4 times and is canceled every single time. Patrick Cote is number one.
I don't know.
Canadian legend. Number 2, Heath Herring. I've really wanted Heath Herring for a long time. Bounty hunter right now.
I don't really know.
What was that, balloons? Was that you, Joey?
I didn't
I didn't see balloons.
The fuck
I saw
was
him.
that?
I didn't do it.
I don't know what the fuck that was. All right. Heath Herring's number 2. Number 3, Chemo. I'd say Chemo.
I don't really have any connections with him.
Joey, who else have we really missed on?
I want John Marsh because John Marsh had the experiences with the Russian mafia and the Japanese Yakuza. Okay. Did fixed fights.
Dude, okay. Here's the thing. We got to keep this kind of between us because there's some other fucking scumbag that they mine our channel for information and then they make like reels of it. They get tens of thousands of views. John Marsh, if you look at his record, you're going to go, oh, okay. He's fought at some high-end people. He's fought all over the world. Okay. I will tell you what, his backstory and history and the shit that he was involved in, you got the keys. You just got to know how to open the door. If we get John Marsh, it's probably going to be one of our most listened to episodes if he is honest.
I don't know anything about him.
Another one, Dirty Bob Schreiber. That's another one up there.
That'd be a good one.
Yeah, these are all beyond me.
Schreiber goes way back, but he was fighting in Europe at the time.
Yeah, he was, John, if you look at some of his fights, he comes out of the locker room when they announce his name. His eyes look like headlights on a car because he just did a line of whatever it was that was available. And he's coming out like he's just blazed. Whatever he's on, it carried him through the fight. He's like Rene Ruse. He's Gilbert Yvel, Gordeau. He's one of the dirtiest fighters ever.
Let's talk about our wish list that does pertain to John Perretti. That'd be Igor Zagoviev.
He's in our pocket. We're ready to go.
That's going to be a great one.
I just have to get a date from him.
We get Zinoviev. We've been talking about Zinoviev for a long time. And Zinoviev, Eddie Bravo brings him up a lot as well on his podcast.
I don't really think that you should mention Eddie Bravo to me since I can't get on his show.
That is,
I don't fucking give a shit who he talks about. It's
John-
people that say things, they're going to do things, and then they don't do them. So, I mean,
wait, John, let me just clue our audience in on something. I just showed up over at Eddie Bravo's gym, and the woman working there, I told her I was John Perretti, and I gave her your phone number on a piece of paper.
well, no one's called me.
I know he's doing a jiu-jitsu tournament this week, but I did my best John Perretti imitation.
You feel guilty or something? I didn't accuse you of anything.
I went in there yelling at everybody.
We continue our efforts. We're marching forward. We're trying to corner him. If he shows up at a BKFC, we're going to ambush him.
Yeah.
I don't really know how you. I don't know what you people are afraid of. That's my where I stand now. I'm incredulous as to what they're afraid of. You ask a question and I answer it.
Let's set the table. It's entirely possible that John Perretti is 100% blackballed from some of the upper echelons of the UFC, and it's kind of flowing down to a certain level.
We might have a better chance getting John on if we can hype it up that John Perretti is a flat earther, because Eddie Bravo likes that topic. Doesn't
I don't
think
have
we
to be
landed
a flat earther to discuss those kinds of things with him, though.
Yeah.
I can discuss things that he's never even talked about.
Good foot through the door.
Anyway, I'm hungry and
like, share, subscribe. I got to get out of here. Love you guys. Do your thing, man. Be good.
show.
Take care.
Check out the full interview on iTunes, Spotify, and all major podcast platforms.